I never thought I'd be in radio this long. 2-3 years, they're going to know there's no way, and then they're going to replace me or something. But just as you're doing that, you're getting more experience. I really do believe that working in clubs and being in Calgary and being a Calgarian has really helped me on the radio. You know, I could sit there and drop an old school song and go, do you remember me playing this at so-and-so or hearing this in the summer of so-and-so at the Stampede? And people in Calgary are like, of course I do. Like, I can relate because he's lived my life in the city.
Welcome to the Calgary Sessions. This is episode number 150, which is kind of cool. I'm your host, Jeff Humphreys. Before I get into it, if you like this episode, please subscribe or review it. I'm trying to get some more exposure. It's the only little sales hook I'll do on this thing. Today's guest, introduced to him by my good friend Wes. Wes and I go back to 1999 to this school called the Applied Multimedia Training Center. That's how long I've known Wes.
Wow.
So Wes and I go way back. He loves the show. He's always got great suggestions of who to bring on, and your name was very quick to come up. So please name and who you are.
DJ Kov, right here from Calgary. I've been here for a long time. Love the city and happy to be here.
Long time, not born here, but early days?
Not born here, but I was here since grade 2.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. So, I call myself a Calgarian.
Sure.
For sure at this point.
Obviously.
Yeah.
It's funny because I've heard your name for a long time, just being in the DJ world, but obviously maybe we were in the same club at some point, but I've never actually met you and I don't know shit about your story. So
great.
So this would be a cool experience for me just to hear, the music thing in my world was pretty big for a lot of years, and music still is a thing for me. And so just to sit across from somebody that does it at your level will be, it'd be cool to hear just kind of what makes you tick. So
thank you.
Thanks for doing this.
Of course.
I don't know if you've seen one of these, but the gist of the show is I like the guests to go back as far as they want to go. So where they grew up, how they grew up, how their parents inspired them, didn't, siblings, jobs, school, and we kind of weave our way to where you are today.
Okay. Yeah.
So walk this thing back as far as you want to go, and then we'll just kind of...
As far as I want to go.
We'll just get going.
There'll be gaps here and there, I'm sure, because I'll remember something and I won't remember something else.
Dude, and the more tangents, the better. So wherever it goes.
By far, the most influential person in my life for music was my brother, my older brother. He's quite a bit older than me. He started DJing in his bedroom. I was in my bedroom. And I was
How old are you guys?
What's that?
How old are you? Kind of
That's the one thing that's off the record. No one knows how old I am. So
amazing. So this goes back to early days.
This is when we started. So I would have been, call it 13, 14.
Yep.
So super, super young.
Yep.
And then he was 21, 22.
Okay.
And
so he was a person in your world, right? Older brother by that amount
Oh
of
yeah,
years.
he was a big part of raising me. It was my dad worked overseas quite a bit, so my mom, me, and my brother were the ones that were kind of together all the time. He'd come back. They're still together and stuff like that. It was just that for financial reasons, he worked overseas.
Yep.
And I just saw him playing around with turntables and records and everything else, and I was never allowed to touch it. And then immediately I started listening and trying to figure out what was going on. I was big into hip hop at the time.
Yeah.
He went
based on his influence. Was he playing hip hop?
No, he wasn't. No, he was more into the house stuff. But that's, I think, his influence on me for music is why I like everything from hip hop right to house. And I've been able to I think part of how I've been around for so long is I've been able to go through those different genres.
Yep.
And because I truly love both of them.
Yep.
And right now with old school being back, it's a key. Again, there we go, bouncing back and forth. But
dude, no,
so
nonstop. But when you were you growing up, was music around the house? How'd was your mom playing it, or did your brother just pick it up somewhere? What did those early
partying
days?
was around my house a lot.
Oh really?
My parents were huge social people, always had people over, always had music in the background. They're playing poker. They're gonna be like, don't say that about us, Cobb. But they'd be playing poker, having drinks. We'd be around there.
Yep.
So we really got influenced by the party atmosphere, I guess, and the social aspect of things. And my uncle owned a record store in Toronto. So when I finally was able to DJ in clubs, and I got into clubs just under 18 actually, to DJing, I was getting my records from him.
What record shop?
It was called Star Sound.
I thought you were gonna say played a record.
No, they were competitors though. So in that movie, if you watch the Play the Record documentary,
Yeah.
he's in it, and so is the store because they were direct competitors.
Way.
Yeah.
Where was the shop? I lived in Toronto for just under a year.
It was on Yonge as well, but
Okay.
maybe
north of it, I guess.
it'd be, I don't remember which way. So it was HMV.
Yeah.
play the record, right?
Yep.
And then
They're
they'd
just
be down here,
Okay,
yeah.
they're south.
And then they would call tracks afterwards. And they had a magazine called Street Sound.
Crazy.
So,
Interesting.
yeah, that's kind of how I got all my records first. And of course, in that day, there was no, man, I sound so old, but there was no way you can just download the stuff. It was like you break records and all of a sudden you have people being like, oh, that's cool. How do you get that? And it's like,
did he ever like call you and like play the record over the phone?
oh yeah, all the time. Yeah.
Isn't
I
that
call
wild,
once a
though?
month and be like, what's the bag? He goes, I got this. I'm like, okay, well, and I was paying $18 to $22 a record, a song,
That's what I did, man.
right? Which is crazy nowadays. And people complain about paying $30 for unlimited MP3s, but, and I'd hear about, okay, yeah, send it to me. He goes, trust me on this one. This is big in Toronto. And he sent it over here. So, that's kind of where I started into the clubs. And then my brother got back. He went and did his education. I was still trying to do my education.
Yeah.
I was also working at HMV and got in the clubs promoting.
Yep.
So it was kind of like a full circle of music for me. And I just stuck with it. And I said, well, if it works out, great. But if it doesn't, what am I going to fall back on? So I went to Mount Royal, did my behavioral sciences there. Luckily, I've never had to use it.
So junior high school,
Yeah.
what were you what had your attention? Was it music early or were you like sports? Or was it?
It was music.
Yeah.
Right from the get-go. Yeah. I probably got into music grade 7 is when I really got into it. I just, for me, because at that time, my English wasn't great. It was okay. Like I could speak English. I started speaking English. I was in English second language thing in grade 2, 3.
Yep.
So again, I wasn't fluent, but I could get by and everything else.
Yep.
I just found music as an escape for me. So if I was angry, it was listening to something that kind of talked to me. If I was having a rough day, I got it out with music.
Yep.
And yeah, I think it was grade 9 or so. I started really trying to mess around with DJing and scratching here and there. And, you know, my brother was away. His equipment was at home.
Yep.
And even though I was supposed to never touch it, I mean,
There was a
I'm the
time.
little brother, of course. Yeah. So
It was pretty underground back then, you know, like everything wasn't so accessible. Like you and I talked about earlier, just like the instant gratification of everything right now.
right.
Whether it's the investment in the actual gear, you know, turntables are expensive. Records were obviously super expensive, but like it was pretty underground. Hey, like there wasn't, unless you had this, like, there wasn't a lot of examples of what was possible.
I think what was possible, you make a great point, and I think also the longevity of a DJ.
Yeah.
It's was never like you could do it for a career. It's like you could do it in your, 18 to 25 or 30, and then you got to get out because you got to grow up.
Yeah.
Right. And I think the same could be said about hip hop. And I just saw this. I read this clip, anyways, and it was because hip hop was new, because DJing culture was kind of new. No one knew where the end was.
Yeah.
Right. If you work a real job, it's like 65, you're done and wrapped up.
Yeah.
If you're DJing, most people are in and out at a certain point because that's what it was set before.
Yeah.
And then once the internet and clubs and that whole scene really exploded, now you have guys like the biggest DJs in the world are old.
Yeah.
Now, if you're looking at hip hop, I don't mean old, older. You look at Jazzy Jeff.
Yep.
He's still killing it. You look at the EDM guys, Tiesto, David Guetta.
Yep.
Like they're still on top of their game, and they have been for 20 something years. So
It was such a fun thing to do. Like, and there weren't these examples. You know, my example is DJ Rice.
right.
Him and I were
Yeah.
like really tight. But he was kind of this like groundbreaking dude in the city that has been able to stretch it for all these years. But there's the majority of people have had to do something else.
Right.
And which is kind of like any pro athlete, pro musician.
Yeah.
You know, there's only the best of the best can actually do the thing as their pro career for a duration of time. So it's kind of the same with DJing, right? Like, how good are you?
And if we talk about Rice, just as a side note, I mean, if you talk about Calgary and DJs, I mean, that guy is literally legend.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that's the guy.
Yeah.
Right. So
Was Sunday school part of your?
no, I knew about it.
Yeah.
But I've also just known his name for so long.
Yeah.
And again, someone that you kind of look and go, he was able to, I don't want to say drag it out, but be so relevant. And you could tell that he's got passion for the music because he lives and breathes the culture and music.
Yeah.
And that's someone that you look at and go, wow, like if you actually believe in what you do, you can make something out of this.
For sure. Yeah. When you were talking about your uncle sending you records, that's how Rice did it back in the day.
Right.
So played a record. They would do the weekly call.
Yeah.
All right. Listen to this one. He's like, yep.
Ticket.
Yep. Yeah. And then this like box of records would show up.
Yeah.
And that was like, that's a big investment.
And it was a lot of money. Yeah.
Dude.
Yeah.
I think I have about 1,200 records.
Yeah.
So I was buying them between like 2002 and 2006, I guess.
Yeah.
From Play to Record.
Right.
And so, same thing, $21 a pop, right? And it's just like, There's a lot of money sitting around I'm not using right now.
You want to know the record collection my brother and I have?
Yes.
We're guessing about 30,000.
Holy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it actually accessible?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like it's all like in a wall or like in crates or something? Like
Crates, wall.
Yeah.
A lot of it, when my brother moved out, when I moved out, it's still my parents' basement.
No
but
way,
all
man.
filed away like
No
in like I think my brother's in BPM, mine is in genres.
Yeah.
When I moved out, I took out like the ones that I really wanted, and that's easily 5,000 records in my basement. Easily. Like you can't put it in a room. Like you need like
Crazy.
walls and walls of it. Yeah.
You know what you're gonna do with it all? And so the reason I'm asking is because I've been thinking about or Rice's son actually. I've been thinking about giving him all my records, letting him categorize them,
Right.
and putting them up on that. I forget the website that's selling them right now. I'm drawing a blank. It's the reseller for all. Like I played house, and so it's this like reseller for all house music. And so some of these defected records are going for like $500,
Really?
and I bought them for 21.
Yeah.
So part of me is like, I feel like I should catalog everything, sell them all, and see if I can get back my $22,000 that I'm into it. Do you know what you're gonna do with all yours?
I just think that'd be a great idea, but I think it's just so time consuming.
Dude, and that's why
like it's impossible. I don't even know where I'd start. Like I have no idea where I'd start. But you know, when you say defected, like look all the Nervous records, right?
Yep.
Same thing. It's like, where do you start? And how do you know what's the value is? Unless you get someone to come in and be like, I'll do it, take 20%.
That's it.
And I'm like, that I'll do.
That's it.
That would I 100% do.
Which, you know, I bet you there's some music people out there, aspiring DJs, young kids, whoever, that would essentially, if you paid them, you know, the same wage as working at a regular job, categorize all my stuff, get it all online, and you take a cut off the top.
Yeah, I could retire.
Done. That's it though, right? But it's like you're hanging on to these things for nostalgia. It was a pretty amazing time back then when music was coming out on 12-inch, and that like you had early stuff and you could release it. Like that was a vibe. But man, like when we're dead, and these things are just like, it's been on my mind for the last 2 weeks. So it's really interesting that you and I are actually talking about it.
And I had records that I would buy 2, 3, 4 copies of, right?
Because you know you're gonna.
I'm just gonna wear them out. Like I knew it was such a big hit, and I'd wear them out. Or if it was limited edition, I'd be like, I need this copy. Yeah. And I still have 1 or 2 of those 4 that are still perfectly wrapped. I'm like, that's got to be worth something at this point.
For sure.
Like, I don't know. It's just bizarre. Yeah.
The bump that I would get if I could pull out 20 grand from this stuff.
Yeah.
That goes a long way in my world.
Oh yeah.
You know, like that.
Oh yeah.
That puts me ahead. So
yeah.
Were you working in high school, junior high? Like HMV, when did you get there?
I've been working probably since I was 11, 12 years old.
No way.
Yeah. From paper delivery to McDonald's. HMV is pretty much where I got into like the music side. That was my way in to understand music and understand different genres of music. And that's kind of why I got in there. There's another guy who's also, again, along the lines of Rice, DJ Wayne B.
Yeah.
He kind of hired me there, brought me under his wing, and I learned a lot from him too. So there's a couple guys I would count on, 4 or 5 guys in my life, a couple from Calgary that have really influenced and helped shape what I was able to do and find your own way of kind of what you do and how it affects you. So
starting off working early, was that just out of necessity? You kind of wanted your own cash to kind of...
I wanted my own cash.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because my parents were, loved them to death, very kind. I wouldn't say strict with money, but you get an allowance and that's it. And it's like, well, I want to spend more money than that. So it was kind of like get a job. They also wanted me to get a job to show like structure and getting a paycheck and everything else. So
I've been into some different conversations on the show with people, want to either did start early or want their kids to start early and all the lessons around it.
Yeah.
I think I got my first job when I was like 16 at Safeway.
Yeah.
I was playing hockey. So I was like playing hockey 7 days a week. So it was tough to get a job like at that age.
Right.
But yeah, that's just, you get introduced to so many lessons at a young age, which kind of invaluable, right? You don't really learn this stuff at school.
No, not at all. I'm sure I would say I'm one of the people that would say I learned a lot more in the real world than I have in school by far. I didn't care for school. I just did it because I had to do it. My parents were like, we're not supporting anything else you're doing, but you have to get this education, then we'll support everything else you're doing. But this is the bare minimum you have to do.
They verbalized that? Like they said it out loud? They was like, this was...
Well, education has always been a big thing, like in our family, and I think in our culture just in general. Like you have to get this degree or you have to do this. So I was kind of going against it, but I also knew I wanted something to fall back on in case all this didn't work out because in my head I was also like, well, how long can you DJ for, and what else can you do after DJing? And so I'm glad I got it, because at the time I was like, well, if it doesn't work out, fall back on it.
Coming out of high school, did you music was obviously like all over. Were you working at HMV already in high school?
Yeah.
And so back then, like the energy around a shop like HMV, was it very like when you like Wayne B and these other guys, was the culture, like was the club culture in like HMV, like was it kind of there? Were people going there looking for stuff to play out?
The couple stores that in the city that were run by Wayne or overseen by Wayne or that he was running, they definitely were.
Yeah.
Because he was so entrenched in music and he was so passionate about it that people did go there. So it was on a much, no disrespect to Play the Record or my uncle in Toronto or to Wayne, but it was on a very smaller scale like that, because people went to him to get music and to find out what he thought was hot and what's coming in. And, you know, he researched a lot as well to find out what records to bring in or and then CDs and what singles to bring in. So
was he playing in clubs back then?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like some of the like OG ones back in Calgary?
Yeah. Yeah. I think him and Rice are within the same...
They crossed over,
Crossed over, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they might have played here, like Victorias and Detours, like back in the day. Like
I know
Rice
he
used to
did
play
like,
here.
like Cherry Lounge, he would have played more so?
First,
Yeah.
You got in early, 17, when you started playing out?
Yeah.
So what did it look like when you were growing up, like sneaking time on those decks at home? Like, was it just...
No one cared because my brother was in Toronto.
They were just
my mom didn't know that I was supposed to touch them. My
Yeah.
dad was working overseas, so I was like, it's fine with me. So
what was your, there's no YouTube.
no, you
So what'd your R&D look like? How'd you figure this all out?
great question. And this is what is crazy nowadays, is that someone can learn how to DJ in a 20-minute tutorial on YouTube or half an hour.
And some buttons.
And some buttons, right? And some syncs, whatever else. And hey, that's got a place and time for everything else. I guess, just learned in a whole different way.
Yeah.
I didn't know counting bars until probably 2 years in. I was just going off ear and BPMs. And when you count the BPMs, it wasn't automatically. You had to count it like with your watch, right? And count 30 seconds times it by 2, that's your BPMs. You put a sticker on the record, and that's how you knew that would mix with another song that way. So I remember years after that, do you know Kerry Chang?
Yep.
I was asking him,
Ferocious.
like, I'm like, how do you do this whole mixing and key at this time? And he's like, I've heard you play. You kind of already do it. I was like, oh, okay. Like that was just kind of like a lucky figuring it out, old school way. But I mean, you do put a lot of hours, in my opinion, on learning it from scratch with no help.
Yep.
And there's, again, I'm not saying it's the right way or the wrong way.
Yep.
It's just an old school way of learning it.
Yep.
The only thing I would say is that teaches you a lot more because you invest more time into learning it than now, where it just thinks for you. And I think part of the fun of learning it the old school way is that you're always challenged. I always say, one of my lines in my own head is that I've never had a perfect night to this day. I refuse to say I've had a perfect night, because I could have done this song or this mix could have been perfect. And it's like, my brother's lesson to me was never plan your sets. And I still continue not to just plan them. I just go in there and just wing it. And I feel that's what keeps me engaged and excited about every night that I play.
I love that, because then you can read the room. And I think that like reading energy and watching people's body language and like, you know, knowing what time it is and like all the like human science pieces behind actually having a good night. You know, if you go in with the structure, you're like, well, it's fucking 14 songs in, this should hit. And they're like, nothing's working.
You have nowhere to go.
Yeah, you're dead.
You're like, what do I do now?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. Did you know your sound right away? Like, you had your own records, you're using some of your brother's records. Did you understand what your thing was going to be? Did you understand like how you're going to play?
A little bit. Yeah, I did right from the get go. Cause like I said, I was a huge hip hop fan, but I also really appreciated like the house and dance scene. And you necessarily weren't allowed to do that when I first started. Like, it was like, you can't like that. And we used to do the Palace in the early 2000s. And we had a huge night out there with 3 or 4 DJs. Yep. And I would always, it was a hip hop night, but I would always push the barrier of having like dance remixes of like an Usher song or whatever else. And you could kind of see people like, what's he doing? But in my head, I was like, no, this should, like, I got to force this, not in a bad way, but try to teach him something else and and then now, of course, there is no genres really. But I always wanted to bring a hip hop element to top 40 or to house. So like scratching was big for me. And when you scratch over house, that's when the house community, if I played a house night, it'd be like, what in the world is he doing? It was really cool because no one else, like house DJs typically don't scratch like that, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So that's kind of how I felt, was to kind of combining the two worlds together.
What did it look like for you kind of breaking through? Because I think, so for context, if I started playing out in 03, so back then, no Facebook, barely had websites. Fast forward was probably the thing that a lot of listings, all the poster boards up and down the drag. What did it look like for you to actually break into the scene in Calgary, to actually get your first gig out?
One was my brother's friend.
His brother, like he
was a huge influence. Like he had a friend who was managing somewhere, I think.
Yeah.
I got on that way. But I think my biggest breakthrough was teaming up with a couple guys that I met through HMV. I'm still best friends with one of them right now. And we kind of created this sound crew at the time.
Yep.
And people in Calgary really bought into it. And it was like two sound crews going at it.
Who were they?
It was Align Sound Crew, which was us, and then Beat Matrix, which is
Matrix.
PJ and Drew and Gummy.
Right.
And at the time, it was pretty, it sounds like a movie, but it was pretty intense.
Yeah.
Like we were going at, we were doing 5-6 nights. They were doing X amount of nights.
Yep.
And we talked, like I saw PJ a couple weeks ago, and it's just so cool to see him now, because I'm like, we're both able to get through that. And too bad things aren't like that now, where people are like so passionate about music, because things change, right? But we reminisce about those days and go, man, was that ever cool? Instead of having the big beef and going, oh, I didn't like you, or you didn't like me. It's kind of like, wow, we did something, right? And in our minds, we did something. I'm sure the average person's like, oh, that was whatever, right? But, we feel it's cool.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people like of our like growing up in that kind of scene, because when I worked at the embassy, Beat Matrix parties every Sunday night, every long weekend. Right. So I was around PJ and all that music because I was working at the embassy. Right. But I always knew about the Alliance crew and what's interesting is, I think, like you said, that energy, two kind of groups pushing the thing forward, is very interesting, right? Very
cool, yeah.
And yes, there's animosity, and yes, there's this and that, but it's also, how creative can you be, and what can you do? So,
it pushes you, right?
For sure.
It pushes you to be better, and I think they were better for it, and we were better for it. Yeah. And I think we probably helped each other so much that we were able to move on different directions in our careers. And I would say, I think most of the people that were involved in those two crews did really well. Like,
it was an interesting time. Yeah. Just because it actually opens up more doors, right? Yeah. Because more people are exposed to this culture, which then club owners are like, okay, maybe we see this following. We'll open up a night for these guys here, and then it actually creates more. It's like, instead of looking at it, sometimes you look at competition as a problem, but if you look at it, there's like the abundance behind this. Right. Then it kind of works.
And the other thing I'll say about at that time was that, as opposed to right now, which I feel DJs try to get into places or network and get into places and play for very lower wages, I would find. Yep. At that time, I think we knew our worth to a certain point, and they knew their worth. So when clubs said, well, they'll do it for this, we're like, no, they won't. Or I'm sure they had the same thing, being like, oh, well, we can get these guys to do it. And they're like, no, this is our price, and we're kind of going into that. Yep. So I think that was a cool thing that we didn't really appreciate about each other, is that we pushed owners of nightclubs to pay us for sure, but we thought we were well worth, because we're bringing in tens of thousands of dollars on dark nights, right? So
without that kind of like crew idea, if you were a one-off, like trying to go sell, dropping off CDs or whatever, tapes or whatever to the different clubs, it would have been, you think you would have got the same kind of opportunities?
I don't know. I find for myself, I'm here now today because of all the stuff I did go through. Like, there was a time that I was doing solo stuff. There was a time I was doing the sound crew stuff. Yeah. Then I went solo for quite a long time. Then I teamed up with a drummer, and we did this drum and DJ concept, which we still do. And now I would say 80, 90% of my stuff is back again being solo. Yeah. So it just kind of, this flow of, and again, it's hard to expect someone to stay that dedicated to music and to the club scene and to the DJ world for as long as I have. But I appreciate it more now than I did when I started. And then a couple of years ago, of course, when everything shut down, I was like, did I just play my last festival? Is that it? Am I done? I was actually concerned. I was like, man, I wish I would have enjoyed that moment on stage more and not taken it for granted. So when things opened up again, since then,
dude,
you
just like hang on, just
hang on. And I would say that was what changed in my mind was that very rarely will I play a show right now, whether it's a festival, a show, regular club gig, that you'll see me with a drink.
yeah,
I've just completely like,
yeah.
I want to be zoned in and in the moment and appreciate every moment because I don't know what's going to be pulled out again. Is there going to be something else happening?
Yeah.
You know, is it going to, like, it's just so many variables now
Yeah.
that you take for granted. So,
Fascinating.
yeah.
Coming out of high school,
Yeah.
did you have a plan? Did you have an idea of what your next 4 or 5 years would look like?
Yeah, I was trying to get in broadcasting.
No way.
This is, yeah.
So broadcasting, and why? Like,
I can get in.
because your marks or what?
What? No, I did the test and they're like, no, you don't pass the entry exam. And I was like, what? Okay, cool. Like, I get it.
Yep.
Tried again. I think I tried for broadcasting at Mount Royal 3 times.
Wow.
And every time I was refused because I wanted to do it. Like, I wanted to get into radio. And
Okay. Why?
how crazy is that? It's
Bizarre.
one of my favorite stories because
This is at the college, right? This isn't university yet.
yeah. And this is and even now, up to a couple of years ago, when students do the practicum in broadcasting at SAIT, the SAIT instructor, one of them, he had called me like a couple of years ago, messaged me, and he goes, "Man, this is crazy because there's a lot of students that want to follow you and see how you did, what you did with your brand and everything else." I'm like, "That's very humbling. Thank you." He goes, "But I have a hard time telling me he didn't do broadcasting." Right now, I'm like, sorry. Like, what do you want me to? So I did go again. It was like that whole HMV and clubs and understanding music and promotions and sales and kind of package it all together. And again, right place, right time for radio that I got into. But yeah, that was my plan initially, was to go to broadcasting, and Mount Royal Broadcasting did not let me in. So
funny.
Mount Royal, where's the camera? There.
It's funny.
I remember.
Dude.
Don't invite me to your alumni parties.
It's so funny. 2 weeks ago, I spoke at MRU.
Okay, yeah.
I spoke to this digital writing class.
Yeah.
And their year-end project was a podcast.
Yeah.
And so I get in there, and the teacher's like, "Hey, I could just give us your history and then give us your educational history." I was like, "Well, you probably should have done your research." I dropped out of Mount Royal 3 times.
Oh, wow.
I never graduated. And so it's like this.
Yeah.
It's very interesting, right? Like, now you're in the professional space, you've done all the things, and now you're looked at as a resource.
Yeah.
And they want to bring you through to kind of help the next gen.
Totally. Yeah. Like, how'd you do coming to Mount Royal? Like, tell us. It's like, I didn't. Yeah.
What was it about radio? Was there personalities on air that you were drawn to, or did it feel like, I don't know, man. I don't want to say like the real job in music, but did it feel like
It was just cool. Like, you hear that back in those days. God, I hate to sound like that and so old. But those like countdown shows, there still is now. But at that point, that's where you got your new music from, right? So I just thought it was really cool that someone's delivering new music on a massive platform.
Yep.
Instead of a club. Club is phenomenal. I think it's great research to this day. But that platform and having that audience base was just something that I thought was really cool. I thought my uncle in Toronto had a radio show in Toronto and then back home in Iran. So it's just like really cool to see what could you actually do it and would it be able to work?
Yeah.
Right? Because I didn't know anything else. Like, I was not good at anything in school. Like, I'm lucky I got by. I like psychology and radio, and that was it. And there's no way I was going to be able to move on the psychology world and make something of myself. Like, it's just not going to happen. I didn't think so.
So after the third time, when it's like, no, what, like...
I went to Mount Royal, just did behavioral sciences.
Gotcha.
So that was my second interest, and I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll do that.
Yep.
And then once I get that, then I really had my parents' support and be like, okay, well, go for it, and we got you, and see how long it takes you, and if you can, make this work. If you can, great. If not, at least you have something to fall back on.
Yep.
That's all they ever wanted. They wanted me something to fall back on. So
when you were going to college, were you working a lot of nights? Like, was the night club world, were you heavy into it and working a lot?
Probably 2-3 nights, I'd say. Yeah.
So quite a bit.
Yeah.
When I was working 3 nights a week, it was just a weird thing, right? You're like this night owl. Everything's like flipped on its head. You're like around this party atmosphere where there's booze and people and all this stuff. And like, it's a time, like, especially when there's good people around.
Yeah.
It's really, really fun. But it's this alternate lifestyle.
Yeah, very much.
There's peers around you that are doing, they're on a different path. And then here we are.
Yeah.
Working a lot of nights. But it was those friendships, like, I still have a lot of them today. And I don't know what it was about that time, but it was very unique.
Yeah. No, I completely agree.
And the balance between school and club life, like, it was just...
Well, I was doing school, working, and club life. And in my head, it was like, I just got to do it because this is all the things I love.
Yeah.
And again, I was really, I've always been pretty structured in life. And I owe that to my dogs that I've had. Like as soon as the club was over, didn't do after parties. I went home right to my dog. I was like, my dog needs me. I need to go back to my dog. So that was like my safe space, my home piece. That's what kept me away from a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
Not trouble, but you know what I mean.
Like bad choices.
Bad choices.
Like,
better. Yeah.
You get like, you might get in a spot where you're like,
Yeah. So,
where'd the dog thing come from? I'm a dog person too. So like, have you always had a dog?
not always, but more so in my adult life, or late teen life, I guess it would be.
Yep.
And I just fell in love with dogs. Like it was, it's just something. I mean, as a dog person, you just can't explain it. Yeah.
No, I don't know what it is. It's all the unsaid things.
Yeah.
Like this for me, it's just this, but to your point, it's this like beacon to get you home.
Yeah.
Which I also, is important.
Yeah. I mean, my dogs in my life have just been so instrumental in everything that I've done in life and who I am and how I live my life, the principles I hold close to me.
Yeah.
I'll have a dog for the rest of my life for sure. 100%.
Rescues, breeds. Do you have is there a
first one was a rescue. Second one was a Portuguese water dog, which I was surprised what an impact he made in the Calgary scene in general, like the amount of money we raised after his passing. And then my current dog is a rescue as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've had 3 Bouviers.
Oh, wow.
And a rescue right now too.
Nice.
Yeah. So it's like, once you're a dog person, you're kind of a dog person.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just to explain to somebody else, you're like,
Well, and the worst thing is
you're like,
when you try to explain to a non-dog person what it is like having a dog, especially unfortunately if they pass or whatever else, and they go, "Oh, just get another one." And it's like, it's not how it works. So it's very hard to try to understand what they're saying until they get a dog. I've had some friends get a god dog afterwards. They're like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry for being such an idiot with you. I understand now. I get it." So. Yeah.
I've had 4 of my world. And those are the 4 worst days of my life.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah. 100%.
End of the day, just like they rattle you.
Yeah. I mean, I shouldn't say this. When my first dog passed away, my aunt back home, I saw her once every couple of years. So we were close on the phone, but not like, super close. We see each other every week. She had passed 2 weeks before. And I was probably more shook and hurt that my dog passed away than my aunt, which I feel guilty saying, but it just tells you the magnitude of
for sure
how much people love their dogs because they're with you 24. Like
that's it.
They're there.
That's it.
Right. Good days, bad days, everything else days. Your aunts and uncles and everything else, which I love dearly.
Yep.
But you talk to them once a week, once a month. You see them long weekends,
for sure.
Holidays. So yeah.
Completely agree. It makes all the sense in the world. There's no.
No, I just want to hug you.
There's no confusion about it.
Yeah.
When you graduate and your parents are like, "Hey, now go do the thing." What did that mean for you, or what was your approach?
The pressure was just off as far as like, have you done your homework? Have you done this? Have you, what's next? You can't be out that late. And it was like, okay, so how can we help?
Right.
Like, what do you need? And at that time, I didn't really need anything because I was working quite a bit, and I was like, this is going down a pretty good path, but I didn't want to just settle at that point just for DJing. So again, I got involved myself into booking shows. So that was a huge part of, that's how I actually met Wes.
No way.
So it was like booking shows, and I got tied in with the Penny Lane group. I was DJing there, had another opportunity, and then I started booking their shows for 5-6 years, and I still keep in contact with them. I'm still keeping contact with the head guy, and that was another way to understand music. So now you have promoting on the streets with flyers, you have DJing, you have the sales on the HMV side, and now you're starting to book the shows. Yeah. So my whole vision was always, how could I really understand the music industry as a whole?
And you thought about that? Like you gave that like a lot of...
Yeah. Because the money at that time when I first got the job was garbage.
Yeah, for sure.
So was the radio gig when I first got the radio gig. But in my head, I was like, okay, forget about the money. It's an investment to learn, right? So I was like, if I prove myself booking these shows, I know the owner is going to pay me.
Right.
Because he was a very fair person. He's like, I'm just creating this position, but you prove yourself, we'll talk again. And sure enough, we kind of worked through that. And again, he was very fair and definitely paid me.
That attitude's different, right? Like that approach is different. That approach of like, and which is interesting when you and I talked off camera, you're like, well, so what's the deal with the show? And like, la, la, la. That approach of either not being focused on money out of the gate, knowing that it's like information is valuable, experiences are valuable, building relationships. Like, it's all these, they sound like basic concepts.
Yeah.
They get lost on a lot of people.
The grind is gone. Like,
yeah. Without that though, like, I don't know. I think all those ideas apply to today. You know, like for somebody that wanted to break through in anything, whatever the anything is, I still think there's all those things could be leveraged to actually make it happen.
I think it's different now, but you still need all those different pieces, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, now we could talk about, you definitely need a social media presence, right? And which platform are you going to use? And do you know how to make something viral on TikTok, right? So it's different than back, I hate saying back then, but it's different than back then.
Yep.
But you still need multiple tools in order to succeed in any industry. And I think sometimes we get caught and just go, well, if we're good at this, that should just do it. Like, I deserve to be this because I had something go viral. It's like, that's not really the way it works. Everyone goes viral at some point doing something, right? You just need to be able to, you know, you're on your 150th podcast, right? So if you had a great one on number 15, you can't be like, well, that's it, made it. Like, no, I had a great one. I have to keep the momentum going and continue to do so, right?
Yeah. Those nights or the shows you booked, you know, the ones where like, if you're playing and it just like, it all works.
Yeah.
Whether it's like goosebumps, whether it's whatever that feeling is, or you're seeing somebody react in a certain way. That feeling haunted me for a long time because I wanted to like replicate it every time I played, which was really hard to do.
Right.
Because there's too many variables, right?
It's possible. Yeah.
Like chasing that high. Was that ever a thing for you, or did you have to manage that? Was it, or were you so involved in like the whole kind of business around it that you just were moving a bigger thing than actually just like making a good night?
No, I think everyone kind of chases it because there's nothing better than getting a reaction off the crowd, whether it's them singing a song, whether it's their hands in the air, whether it's just that you feel them just like dancing in booths and you're like, what are they doing dancing over there, right? Like, it's just a good feeling.
Yeah.
I think it always happens at a certain point in the night. It's just a matter of to what degree it happens. Because it is surprising, you know, maybe a slow night and you're like, okay, there's 25 people in this random place that I'm playing at. But in my head, I'm like, how can I make sure, how long can I keep them for? So I play games with myself a lot. Yeah. I still play games with myself a lot. And it's like, can I keep them till 1 o'clock? 'Cause if I do, that's a home run. Like, why would you want to stay here? So then you're kind of playing games with yourself always to try to keep them there. And that was the high. So it wasn't necessarily the high of them dancing, screaming, hands in the air. And it's like, can I keep them here? Because if I can, that's the high tonight. So it's a different high every night, I think.
Yeah, it's like a different challenge. You're putting your...
in your head. Yeah.
The exchange in energy of that high, that's that one where you're just like, oh my God. Like, it's, I don't know if it, for me, it was kind of like shaky almost because you're like putting the next one, you're like, oh my, this is like, this is all insane right now.
And I think the other high that you get, because again, if I categorize what kind of highs they are, there's a different high from the nightclub than there is to, you know, opening up for somebody big compared to how many people there are, compared to when you're the main act, compared to when you're touring with somebody. Like, there's all these different variables of like, what does that high look like?
Hard to manage it? Is it hard to keep it in a box and understand it?
Not yet, I don't think.
That's good.
Yeah, I think I understand it more now than ever before because now it's just like you've gone through so many nights that you realize what different highs and what you're chasing that night is. Yeah. Right? One thing about DJing for me that has really helped is it's always been an escape for me as well. So you've had a good week, you go and celebrate and you have you try to put on a better set or whatever you're doing to try to be happy doing it. If you had a bad night, you're like, thank goodness I can put that behind me and just go and do what I love. This music is one thing that's never let me down. So that's kind of how I look at it, is that no matter, like last week before, did not have a great week with life or whatever else, right? All things relative, but I was like, oh man. And I told my partner, I'm like, I cannot wait to go DJ tonight. She's like, really? After the week you had? I'm like, that is like my escape. And it's hard to understand that, but I was like, I can't wait.
Music was the thing that kind of like calmed me down, like maybe a different version of myself, and being able to have that escape and have, like to have this thing around you and you just got to play a feeling, like, just kind of trying to create this feeling in this room, good or bad, like, whether it's hands in the air or people just sitting like bobbing their head, whatever, it's a privilege to be able to do that. And it is like an upper to, if you're having a shitty week, it's a good way to end it.
Yeah.
After you're kind of like booking shows, doing all the things, then what started happening after that? Like when did it pretty steady? Like that was a lot of moving pieces in the music.
Yeah. I've been really, really fortunate and grateful that I've never had like a break in DJing really. Like it's always been there.
Which is crazy, right?
It's a pretty good run. The only break I had was COVID.
Yeah.
That was the break. And as soon as it opened up again, I was there for this huge outdoor festival. It was like a 90s Millennium Park, Shaw Millennium Park.
Oh yeah.
9,000 people. And I was like, what a way to come back. I was like, oh,
wow.
And that's like the goosebumps because you're like, I miss this. I miss this so much. And I'm so happy to be here and seeing people out there again. And then that kind of, so yeah, there's been no real break. So
does it progress? Like how does it, it's when you're tackling booking shows, booking nights, you're kind of like all around it. How does it, what else do you do when you've got your hands in so many different things?
I think just different things take priorities, right? Like right now, I barely book anything. I'll maybe suggest something to somebody that I know really well that does more of the booking stuff.
Yeah.
Radio is obviously a big part right now.
I'm really curious to see when the radio piece jumped into the equation here.
Oh, you're gonna love that one.
So as you're booking the gigs for Penny Lane, yeah?
Yep.
And then so you're kind of doing all that, you're in it, right?
Life is great.
You're in the scene.
Yeah.
Like you're just kind of,
like
you're
I'm
all
booking
over it.
shows for Penny Lane, Tantra at the time.
Oh yeah. Love it.
So I'm doing Tantra at the time and working in the office booking shows for Penny Lane and DJing. I think it was 3-4 nights a week.
Yep.
And things were great. I was like, this is what I wanted.
Yeah.
And then this guy that I know comes in with another guy for one of my nights. And it was 2009, it would have been. 2009 to come in. And then afterwards, the guy texts me and he goes, or he asked for my card. And he goes, hey, I want to talk to you about something. And I was like, sure. We have a new radio station launching off. We think you'd be the perfect guy for a mix show. And I was like, you hear it a million times.
Oh, yeah?
Right? Like about people promising
the
things.
idea?
Yeah. Hey, I'm going to fly you to Vegas. And
I got this new room.
Yeah. Like it's just, none of it pans out. But I was like, oh, this guy seems like he's not drunk and spitting on me. So yeah, I gave him my number. And sure enough, next morning, 10 o'clock, he calls me, goes, launching off this new station. Can you come in for a meeting? All this kind of stuff. I go in there, meet with them. And it's maybe 3 weeks later. I meet the head guy that's running the whole operation. He's like, okay, well, you ever thought about being on the air? And I was like, yeah, Montreal never let me in, right? And he goes, well, let's just see how we do. And he put me on like 3 or 4 overnight shifts from like 2 a.m. to 5 a.m., which is awful. But again, investing in yourself. I'm like, it's worst case scenario. At least I was on the radio once in my lifetime. That's kind of how I thought about it, which was the dream as a kid for my brother and me, right?
Yep.
So I did those 3-4 shifts and I would stream it and listen to my own breaks and criticize myself. I criticize myself a lot, not in a bad way, but try to understand where I screwed up, what I could do better. I'll probably do that with this podcast. Why did I say this or that? Or I could have done it differently.
Blame me.
Yeah. And so I did those 4 shifts. The Monday came, they wanted to have a meeting with me. I'm like, oh man, I really screwed that up. But a mix show is great. Like I'm gonna do a mix show at 5 o'clock on the station. I'm on the radio. How amazing is that? And then he came in, he had a hire package for me. He goes, so what'd you think? And I was like, the on-air stuff is probably beyond me. Like and don't forget, I had no training. It was like, this is the mic pot up and these are the 2 channels and go. And I was like, well, what's that thing? He's like, for phone calls, you'll learn it later. Don't worry about it. And it's like, what is a screen? He's like, it's a touch screen. I'm like, oh my God, I'm not touching anything. So he gave me this hire package and he goes, we're gonna put you on evenings. I was like on the air? And he's like, yeah, you're gonna be on our evening jock and do the mix shows at 5 o'clock. I was like, okay. And he goes, and now you're also the music director. And I was like, what is that? Like, what does that actually entail for a radio station? Like, I don't know. And he goes, oh, you'll learn it. You know music. I know you know music. The rest, I'll teach you. And I was like, okay. So then I did a year on evenings.
Yep.
Then the afternoon came open, and I had really decent ratings. And I was starting to feel really, really comfortable being on the air, and it became a lot easier for me.
Yep.
So again, at the time, I got hired not for the greatest cash, but I was like, I could literally go anywhere after this and say I did a year in a major market and you can work somewhere else.
Yeah.
Like you don't need that degree of broadcasting anymore. So in my head, I was like, I just got a broadcasting degree for free. Right? So a year later, they moved me to afternoon drive, and yeah, it's kind of
And still?
Still music director, still mix shows, and still afternoon drive.
That's like when I know nothing about, I swear to God, I know nothing about like your history. So
Yeah.
you're like, still, you're like, holy shit.
And then now I do multiple markets. So now I do Vancouver as well. So, but yeah, in general, the same position, just more markets. But yeah, pretty crazy.
You know, like you're investing in yourself. That it's been a theme here, like during this chat. Do you think it's what allows you to do that? So to actually take this radio gig, you're like, yeah, okay, I've always wanted to be in that world, so I probably can sacrifice. The financial thing is, what is it that allows you to do that? Is it because you had all these other jobs that could give you this foundational, monetary level that you could actually take the hit over here and make it work?
Part of it's that, but part of it I also knew I was in a position that I knew if I screwed up at some point, that I think one, it wouldn't be a massive screw up. And what's the worst thing that happens? I go back and live with my parents, but I get to chase a dream that I've always wanted to do, right? So if you talk about playing hockey and you're making no money, but you just go and do it because you're like, what else am I going to do? If I don't chase this and try to do it, how will I ever be true to myself, being like, at least I gave it a shot?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I thought. I never thought I'd be in radio this long. I was like, even when I got in to give me afternoon drive, I'm like, 2-3 years, they're going to know there's no way, and then they're going to replace me or something. But just as you're doing that, you're getting more experience. And then I really do believe that working in clubs and being in Calgary and being a Calgarian has really helped me on the radio.
Yeah.
Because it is localized. It is, I could sit there and drop an old school song and go, do you remember playing, me playing this at so-and-so, or hearing this in the summer of so-and-so at the Stampede? And people in Calgary are like, of course I do. Like, I can relate because he's lived my life in the city.
Yeah.
Right?
Fascinating, man. Do you the exchange in energy in a live festival, club, whatever, there's that thing. How does it work for you? What do you get out of the radio gig? What is it that like fills you up to still be crushing it for this long?
Radio's interesting because when you first start, you're talking to literally nobody.
Which is weird.
When we talk about like getting a reaction off the crowd, whether it's hands or heads, you're in a studio and you're talking, and is anyone listening? Right? Like you have no idea. So you base it on phone calls, text coming in, interaction. But I think what I've learned is that it may happen occasionally or once in a moment where you feel like you've engaged with an audience about a topic or about something music-wise. Like most of my show is based on music. Okay. So I really live and breathe what we play. Yeah. So if I come across and give my opinion on, like right now, for example, Drake, I'm very passionate about what I think about Drake and the current beef with another rapper and what's going on. I'm very passionate about how big, even though she's not my favorite artist, but I'm very passionate about being like, listen, I'm a huge Michael Jackson fan. I think the guy is the greatest thing of all time, but I gotta say Taylor Swift is the biggest artist of all time now, just because of the metrics, whatever else, which is very hard for me to say, but I'm being very truthful to the audience. Yep. And, Taylor Swift fans are like, I'm like, yeah, I gotta tell you like it is where I feel. So I feel there's that interaction of me being really authentic for one. And the biggest compliment I always get is if I do meet somebody and they recognize me for the radio, they're like, man, you sound the same and your personality is the same as you are on the radio. Like you don't usually, I'm like, that's really cool. That's the biggest compliment I can get. Yeah. Is that you're the same when I'm talking to you right now as when I hear you. Yeah. And it's like, yeah, that was the whole point. Right? So
this isn't the show. This is what it is.
Yeah. You
said earlier, like obviously you can't believe you've been doing it this long. What is when you're balancing like the DJing and then the radio, is it this like perfect blend for you? Does it feel, are you getting filled up from both things at this very unique level?
Never been happier.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
It's rare, man.
That's why like every day I say I appreciate things now more than I did before, because if you would have asked me when I was 16, 17, 18 years old, what do you want to accomplish when you're an adult and by the time you're done DJing, whatever else, like I've made a living off of doing what I love. And I think that's such a special thing to be able to say and authentically say it that I can't believe it. I actually cannot believe it.
Mm-hmm. What's allowed you to do it, you think? Do you really give it, like, how much thought do you give this? And could you actually say what it is? Like,
I can't pinpoint it. All I can say, definitely right place, right time a lot of times. Yeah. I think I really try to be, without being too corny. I've always tried to be a good person and not like, you know, in this industry, people rip people off. They try to, you know, just do things that are kind of shady. And anyone that I've worked with, I hope would say, worst case scenario, I'm not a big fan of him, but he never screwed me over.
Yeah.
Right. Whether it's a gig or, you know, and I've always tried to give people opportunities and try to give advice. And it's always been open-ended. So if someone comes and goes, how did you do this? Or what's your advice to get into this? I'm like, this is how I did it. I don't know if that's the same path, but that's how I did it. So I try to share information. And I think the passion for it, I do got to say it's the city. Like the city's got a vibe about it that I think people are proud in Calgary of Calgarians.
Yeah.
Like there's just something they're very supportive.
Yeah.
I think.
Do you find it exhausting to stay up with music? Do you find it like, you know, as we get older, you know, things change, our priorities change, life changes. To be this like entrenched in music for all these years, does it start to shift into like work?
I find it harder with the amount of music being released right now.
Right.
And the amount of genres that are being released.
Right.
And it has become more annoying with people asking for songs that are like nowhere.
Right.
Because it's on YouTube or Spotify with 10 streams. And I'm like, I don't have it. You don't have it? You're a DJ? And I'm like, yeah, I'm a DJ. And no, I don't have it. And how am I supposed to have this record off a friend of yours that uploaded it 3 hours ago? Like, it's just not a thing, right? But everyone's going to love it. Same stuff, right? But it's just like, that part of it's hard is managing that. And I guess the annoyances get different as you go through different times. Like right now, this cell phone on my face thing. Oh my God.
Being recorded?
Huh?
Being recorded?
No.
Or like here's the song?
Yeah.
Here's the song.
In your face like this.
Right.
And it's like, oh my God. But everyone's going through it.
Yeah.
If you look at like EDM DJs right now, a lot of them are like, put your phones away. Enjoy the show.
Yeah.
And they're getting no reaction. I think it was Bob Sinclair a few weeks ago. He's like, I just had the worst show. And he shows video and it's like, everyone's just standing there with the phone and just recording him. And he's like, no, like I want you to feel it. Stop. Stop recording me.
It's so different because I see those clips come up on TikTok.
Right.
Just with, you know, whether the boat parties or these clubs, wherever. And it's just, nobody's moving.
Yeah.
If they are moving, it's just like straight up and down. Like just these vertical jumps. And I'm just like, man, where's the feeling behind all this? Like,
so that's a new high. If you can get them to put their cell phones away, that is now also considered a high, right? Because their cell phones are away. They're engaged in dancing. They're engaged in going to the bar and having a drink, and you're forcing them to interact, which is really cool.
For sure.
And that's what you want, right?
Yeah.
You want people to interact and be like, oh man, I had such a good time. I met a new friend, new boyfriend, girlfriend at so-and-so club. That was so cool. Right?
Versus like recording, documenting that they were there doing the thing. And that's the important piece. Whereas if you can get them to actually connect on a like real relationship level.
Right.
Way
like
better.
A human level, right?
Yeah. So wild, man. As you're like telling this, I'm just like, there's no way I could DJ anymore. The technology is like fucking turboed, which is crazy. When I see them playing on these rigs, I'm like, what the hell? And it's just as my energy's changed around priorities, right?
Yeah.
How have you kept this priority around music? Is it just in you? Is it just from a young age? It's just like...
It's always been such a big part of me. I feel ingrained in me. I feel like music has saved me in so many moments in my life, whether it was taking it back to like elementary and junior high where I had a really difficult time, whether it's high school, which everyone loves music because they're trying to associate and that's, you know, who you hang out with and everything else. Whether it's your first breakup, the first time you fall in love, like all these things, first song, what song you think that you broke in the market or on radio or what buttons that you pushed to do something, who'd you book that was, you know, that you could tell on a podcast and go, I booked so-and-so for X amount of dollars. And that's kind of like such a cool thing. Yeah. Who'd you tour with? Like all these stories and all these experiences are what keeps me going. Cause you're kind of going, what could possibly be next? Like this is so cool on where this journey's kind of taken me. You've talked about the post-COVID thing a couple of times. You kind of like light up a little bit around the excitement around it. What changed after that? Getting it all like pulled away, still at the radio show. So the music was still a part of your life. Mix show is still there. Like I'm still mixing. I'm still keeping up on music, obviously with the radio station, but you're not playing out live. Yeah. So I think post-COVID, getting that first gig and then going, wow, am I going back to clubs? And very strange because I would say the first 10 club gigs I had going back in the club, I actually for the first time felt nervous. I was like, how do I
got this?
interact with the crowd now? But you've been doing it for so long and you're still having a mix show and you're still at home and everything else. And I'm like, how do I actually, and it takes you a while to kind of get into it.
Yep.
Like I said, like 10, call it 10 gigs, 8 gigs, whatever.
Yep.
And then once you have it, you're like, I don't ever want to lose the feeling again and take it for granted. So I really feel like I go into every night that I do, no matter how tired I am, and I am tired. Like Friday nights, I'm up for 22 hours a night.
On Fridays,
because I wake up at 5:30, 6 a.m.
Yep.
And then I'm up till 3 o'clock in the morning.
Dude.
But it's like, this is amazing. And this is where I want to be. This is what I want to be doing.
Yeah. It's like you seem so clear with it all. Like you're just very dialed on what this is and how it fills you up. And do you know where it's going to go? Are you just open to whatever experience rolls up?
At this point, I'm open to anything because I've realized, especially in the last couple of years, that you may want something or you're trying to figure out, where this road's going to lead, and something else completely pops up and changes the direction of everything. So now I'm just accepting of whatever comes my way. If tomorrow, I stop DJing and lose radio, I will have leaved being very satisfied, being like, man, this was what a great life, great run in music that I had.
Yeah.
And if it keeps going for another X amount of years, all the better, because I'm absorbing and appreciating every moment that I have right now.
And you've squeezed the hell out of it, man. Like there's not a lot of
OGs, just call it OGs.
OGs have been doing it for that,
Yeah.
and been able to kind of like create new opportunities, right?
I think it's rare. Yeah.
It's
Not to sound cocky, but I think it's rare because
you don't sound cocky.
Yeah.
Because it's like anything, like we talked earlier, like being a pro athlete or being a pro at whatever level is rare to get there and actually like hang on to it and do the thing for a duration of time.
I think before, if you would have asked me, I would have been like, oh, my DJing is going to be over in X amount of years because who could possibly do this for this long? But now, like I said earlier on, there is no end, because you look at the biggest DJs in the world in whatever genre, and they've also gotten older and are older and continue to absolutely kill it. So it seems like that stigma of you can only DJ in your 20s is gone, because of course you could DJ in your 20s.
Yeah.
But if you want to make a career out of it, then you have to really focus and try to figure out what else you could do with it to help you, right?
What I've been finding very interesting when I see these clips come up on TikTok is all the old school jams that are coming back. And for someone that's got your history, people must be blown away by the stuff that you can dig up they're just like, what the eclectic mix you must have for all these years of experience. It must just shock the shit out of people.
This is my favorite time in music because it's all come back around again.
And all the good stuff.
And it's I'm glad you mentioned this because it is so easy. I could literally walk into a club and I think, hey, it's a throwback night.
Yep.
We want you. And I'm like, great.
Game over.
And they're like, I can literally close my eyes and be like, go ahead, because you've been through it the first time around.
Yeah.
And I think DJs that haven't been through it the first time around, they can sit there and listen to you or me or whoever else and go, oh, I know I'm going to build this playlist this way. He did the same thing and it's going to work. It's not going to work because those songs and what works and what doesn't work. But yeah, I absolutely, I think that's why for me, I feel like the music environment in clubs and the scene is so good for me.
Dude. Like you must like kid in the candy store.
Yeah,
like, I got this. This is like this is who I am.
Yeah. And when it goes the other way, then you're like, oh, this is the end of it, right? Like, because I can't understand. Sorry to
no, you're not
to change the subject.
No.
You probably know this better than me, but when was it 2007, 2008? Like dubstep was pretty big. Is that
probably
there? When that came out, I couldn't understand it. I couldn't mix it. I couldn't understand it. Didn't like it. And I was like, and it was getting so big that it went from like the dubstep and I guess EDM scene, whatever you want to call it, into mainstream, where I was getting requests for it at nightclubs. And I'm like,
I don't got this.
I don't got it. I don't understand. I can't pick a hit for you.
Yeah.
And then at that moment, that was one of the times I'm like, okay, that's it for me. I'm not gonna pretend to love something that I don't love. I got to pack it in and move along. Luckily, it lasted very, very short term, and it went back into the dubstep world. And I was like, oh, thank God.
Dodged it.
Thank God. David Geddes here. Thank you.
But right now is really fun. I can see you light up when you're talking about like what's
man.
possible right now.
Right
Like,
now
it's-
is so much fun.
like, you know, I don't go to clubs anymore. Just, you know, there's nowhere that cool that I want to go hang. But
Yeah.
the clips that I see online, I'm just like, yes.
It's amazing. It's
Like
amazing.
really fun.
Yeah. And I do find people coming out to the clubs that are a bit older now that we would consider older.
Yeah.
Because they're also hearing the music and being like, hey, that's mine. I was dancing to that back in the Palace, back at Tantra, right? And then a lot of times they'll see me and be like, hey, you're still DJing? And I'm like, I still am DJing. Right? So
Do you ever have to deal with that at all? You still a DJ?
oh God, yeah.
But like, are people? Is it all the things? Impressed? Fuck, what are you doing with yourself?
Yeah.
Like all the
All of it.
different.
All of it.
Yeah.
I think if they know a bit about what I've done or what I'm continuing to do,
Yeah.
they're like, that's so cool that you're still DJing. My kids listen to you or whatever else. I tell them that I used to go and party with you when I was 18 or whatever. And you get the flip side being like, you're still a DJ? And they'll point to their partner and be like, he's still a DJ? I'm like, yeah, but I'm
doing the
happy
thing.
and I'm good. I'm fine.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm fine. So yeah, you get it all. But all of it's fine to me. All of it's great.
Do you put goals or timelines on anything? Do you have a vision for the next 5 to 10, or are you just like?
No, because I realize that if you do that, you're almost blocking yourself out of certain things. I think
Yeah.
this whole being open to all of it for me right now
Yeah.
is where my head's at.
Yeah.
Where if something goes sideways, it goes sideways. Something else hopefully will come up.
Yep.
If something else comes up, great. Like it's just like a moving motion thing, and that's probably switched since having a son, since my kid.
Right.
Because now I'm like, obviously my priorities have shifted, and now there's my partner, my dog, now my son, music. So there's another fold, another person involved in my life.
Yep.
And just trying to balance it all is a little bit tough, but I also love every aspect of it.
Yeah. The idea around just kind of accepting, being open, is that new, or has that kind of been how you've rolled?
No, that's pretty new.
Because you're pretty like calculated before of
Very calculated, very structured, very like, this has got to happen. I got to do this by this point. This is where I want to do. I got to reach out to this. And now I'm just like, okay, it's all kind of worked out. Still be on top of it. Still, network. Still have your,
Yep.
still live your life to the best of your ability and be kind to people and be respectful.
Yep.
And knock on wood, hopefully it all works out.
I came across this lady in July. Her name's Sandra Wigg.
Okay.
She wrote this book called The Power of Gray Thinking.
Okay.
She was in her early 50s, geologist, very structured, calculated, do this, get that, family, blah, 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 blah. Her world fell apart.
Okay.
Divorced, everything like fell. So then she was like trying to figure it all out. So she wrote this book a couple of years ago called The Power of Gray Thinking. And it's all about the gray space. So not black and white decisions, not doing this to get that, but it's all kind of rooted in creativity and being open to different opportunities that present themselves based on just following this creative idea. So that's why when you said it, like the opportunity thing, I was like, oh, this is, and Sandra's been, I call her my cheat code.
Oh, cool.
She's been the person because that's kind of how I've always operated.
Yeah.
I just didn't know it was I couldn't wrap words or an idea around it. It was just kind of how I did the thing.
Yeah.
So anyways, when I met her, I was just like, you have the answers.
That's it.
That's all of it. It's kind of a different spot to be in, right? In that kind of thought process.
Yeah, I think it's almost like a peaceful, weird feeling where like the stress is obviously in everyone's world and everyone's personal bubbles, but I feel that stress is one less stress you have to take on.
Yeah.
Of trying to calculate what's going to happen if this happens. Now I do try to, gauge things that are coming at me and going, well, if I react this way, this is what might happen. If I say this might happen.
Yeah.
But it's a different kind of calculated thing, I guess. It's not like, by January I better have this, and by February 1st I better book my summer. It's like, side note, but like this past 4 or 8 weeks of this year, typically I'll have, call it 4 or 5 corporate gigs, right? And that's kind of like ends off the year. I'm like, great, wrap things up and good to go.
Yep.
And January, February, usually pretty slow for DJs.
Yep.
Well, January, February this year, I had my best January, February of my life by far, like in every aspect. And so I was like, oh, this is going to be a fantastic year. 0 corporate gigs this year for the first time in probably 10, 12 years.
Crazy.
And I was like, okay. But again, I accepted it. I wasn't like, oh my God, how am I going to, I was like, okay, well, it just changed. I had a great January, February.
Yeah.
Not a great November or October, November.
And it's changing how you look at it though, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because to your point, it started off better than ever.
Yeah.
You know, as creatives, we want to be able to, you know, raise the bar.
Yeah.
You know, so if it starts off good, we're like, okay, we can raise it, but it's just perspective, right?
Yeah.
It's understanding it.
And if you stamp the whole year, it's like a fantastic year.
Yeah.
But because you were like, oh, well, it's going to be a better year because of, 4 bookings. It's like 4 bookings is going to make or break you. But in my head, I was like, oh, it's, anyways.
The creative world's interesting.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ups and downs. I don't know how you deal with it. I'm in my head quite a bit. Fitness is kind of my thing where I run through a lot of scenarios in my head.
Okay. Yeah.
Ride my bike, water skiing, playing hockey, all these things. That's kind of where I recalibrate and allow myself to think about all these creative ideas. But sometimes you're kind of on an island by yourself when you're in the creative world.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Which, I don't know, it's what we've chosen to do.
Yeah.
Thanks for doing this.
Thank you. It was fun.
Really cool, man.
Very fun.
Cool to just, like I said, I've known the name forever. So actually hear the story behind it. You're, as soon as you said Alliance and Beat Matrix, it's like, fuck, flashback. I end the show with one question.
Sure.
When I say Calgary, where's your head go?
Home. Yeah.
It's that simple.
I've thought about moving. I've thought about, is there another opportunity somewhere else? Radio could go somewhere else. But Calgary is just home for me. Like, it's just, I feel like it's given me so much. Like, it's given me everything I've ever wanted.
Mm-hmm. So when it's that, like, I'm sure you had opportunities, right?
Yeah. Or you think about taking a risk and being like, can I do this in another city? And, you get in your own head a little bit and be like, what if I was at this place? And, you think about Toronto, right? Mm-hmm. Could I make it in Toronto? It's like, but why? This is home. This is, my parents are here. I'm here. People that I love are here.
Yeah.
The city's been so good to me. So yeah, I just say home.
And I think right beside that too, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but like when it is home and it's got that feeling to it, thinking this way, being open to opportunities, the city is just such an amazing place for those things to actually play out.
Yeah.
Just because of the people that are around us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for doing this.
Thank you.
Thanks for Wes for making this happen. He's just, he's so cool. Obviously be down in Mexico full time, but he's just like, he jumps on Facebook Messenger of all things. He's like, hey, this last show was great, but what do you think about if you had these 2 or 3 or 4 guys? I'm like, yeah, sounds great. So thanks, Wes, for making this happen.
I can't wait to hear his feedback. Oh my God. Why didn't you say this? Why didn't you say that? Come on.
Why didn't you talk about me
That's
more?
why I got you in there.
Thanks again for doing this.
Okay, thank you, man. Appreciate it. Thank you.